Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Goodcast Show. So today is the first for the podcast. We have our first international guest. She comes way from Indonesia. She's a trained scholar in the area of social media analytics. She was a researcher at the Social Media Research Team Lab or SMART Lab at Ohio University during her doctoral study as a Fulbright awardee. In 2020, she became the first fellow from outside the US to train in the PhD Digital Bootcamp at Texas State University. She's trained in the media and communication field and believes that a strategic communication plan is vital in promoting public policy and delivering public service. But today we'll be discussing her book that she co-authored called Misguided Democracy in Malaysia and Indonesia, Digital Propaganda in Southeast Asia, a book she co-authored with a local Malaysian by Dr. Nurianti Jali from my favorite state, Sarawak. So please welcome my guest today. It's an honor and privilege to host Dr. Ika Karlina Idris. How are you, Doctor?
Not really good, actually.
Oh, why? What happened, Doctor? Tell me. I hope it's not our fault.
Yeah, there's this mass protest today in my country, and I'm very far from Indonesia. So even though my physical body in here, but my thoughts,
in
in my country.
Okay. I'm sure you'll be getting back to your country soon, but I hope you give us just 1 hour of your time. Please bring back your mind here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to thank, of course, the people at the wonderful Gerak Budaya for making this happen. By the way, this book is available at Gerak Budaya. We'll be sharing the links in the description, so please make sure to get a copy for yourselves. Now, if you guys have been watching this channel, you know that we talk a lot about politics, and a key element of politics is propaganda. So this book takes a deep look into propaganda in comparing what's happened before in Indonesia and Malaysia. But before we get into that, this is the first time I'm having a guest from outside of Malaysia. And somebody as yourself who is a political commentator of sorts, a political analyst of sorts. I want to get your idea, your views on Malaysia. So what do you think are the key differences between Indonesian and Malaysian politics?
So if it's related to propaganda, the difference is the intensity, I believe. So because conversation in Indonesia are mainly more intensive, it means that more frequent, more numbers, more time, compared to Malaysia. And then if we can look, to be honest.
Please be honest. I want your honesty. Please be honest.
So this is also my first podcast in Malaysia. I still.
Oh, is it your first podcast?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for choosing us.
So I still try to navigate myself.
No, just be honest, please. I like the honesty.
What's appropriate and what's not to be.
Everything goes, Doctor.
I don't want to be banned to enter the country.
You won't.
So I think in Indonesia it's more severe.
Okay.
Compared to Malaysia, it means the severity could also between religious group, like very severe, between ethnic group, and then even between political groups or political supporters. In Malaysia, of course, there's the same condition, but in Indonesia, it's more more severe, more toxic.
Back in Indonesia.
In Indonesia.
Oh, really?
If I compare to the conversation in Malaysia, actually during the COVID, Bobby, the Sarawak's author, we actually analyze conversation related to the COVID and the stigma to Chinese and Muslim, and then if it's the frequency were more higher in Indonesia because of the numbers of population, and then social media users. But then if we look at the conversation in Indonesia, it's more varied, like more topic. The hate speech and polarization are various, but then when we look deeply again, using like human annotator from two countries, it's actually like there are topics that also more intense in Malaysia.
Okay.
For instance, toward the Chinese group. Or
Oh, you mean we were more intense towards the Chinese group during COVID
yes,
compared
during
to
COVID.
Indonesia?
Yes,
Oh,
stigmatizing.
we were worse.
Yes.
Oh, that's shocking because Indonesia has had two civil issues when it comes to the Chinese. I think 1960s and 1998 you had an internal, but we are worse now. Huh?
No, it's during COVID.
I know, but I would think that based on history, the pattern. But yeah, okay.
So I can tell about the sentiment toward Chinese later.
Yeah.
But then, and also related to the certain Muslim group.
Okay.
Because there's a case in Malaysia at that time that one Muslim group, they have like a public gathered during the COVID. So when we look at those two, it's more toxic conversation in Malaysia. But if we just look at the general hate, it's more intense in Indonesia.
Okay.
So and we have paper on that.
Okay.
You can browse it.
I will. We'll share the links. You all can browse. Now, but interestingly enough, I mean, again, because you're an outsider, you're from Indonesia. How different are we in terms of our politicians? Like, for example, if you were to compare the politicians you have currently now in Parliament compared to ours, what's the difference that you see? The main differences?
So the main differences is that Indonesian politicians, because we have more political parties compared to Malaysia, yeah. So the movement is really hard to predict, actually, compared to Malaysia, because like in the presidential election, they can against each other, but then in the local election, and then suddenly they have a coalition, and then it's really shocking for us. But in Malaysia, relatively we can predict like which political party or which politician will work together or form a coalition with whom.
But in Indonesia, you can't predict. It's surprising.
Because it's actually there's no really the political party ideology. Okay. There's no really difference. Okay. Even though they said like we are nationalists, we are they call it agamis or Islamists, but we are also like nationalist Islamists, yeah.
Yes.
But then when they are ruling, there's no really difference between them.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
I think that one we are quite similar. Yeah. Quite similar. Now, before I get to the book, I'm always curious because I have met Indonesians, and Indonesians come across to me as people who are a little bit more well-read than Malaysians. They are more entwined. I mean, they are more sort of in tune with the current political scene in their country. Mm-hmm. In your time in Malaysia, what are the differences between the voters? Malaysian voters versus Indonesian voters.
Indonesian voters, yeah. So I think most of the trend are quite the same, yeah. For instance, like Gen Z, both in Malaysia and Indonesia, they're quite shy to speak up. They prefer private chamber, private online room, online spaces, like like in games they have also like chat rooms. Sometimes they talk in there, but then in the more public platform they don't really speak out or tell about their opinion there, yeah. But I think what's make the difference is the demographic composition. The highest percentage of voters in Indonesia are from low-educated, low-income class. So it's easier to. So when people like say about Gen Z, what's on their mind? It's only like educated Gen Z. But the highest percentage of the voters actually Gen Z that only graduated from primary school, or like cut off in the junior school, and then like low income Gen Z. And then it's really easy to manipulate with the social aids. We call it bansos. and it's really easy to be manipulated by propaganda. For instance, like if you don't choose me, that there will no more social aid for you later. Yeah, I mean, like it's not the presidential program; it's by law. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's the difference because of the demographic are different. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we do have some of those issues as well, where they say if you don't vote me, then things will be very bad.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not. But actually, it's exactly what you said. It's all part of the constitution, so you cannot change.
Yeah.
But anyway, so now this book, I read it and I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. But of course, it talks solely about propaganda. And we all, whoever's interested in politics, will know this concept, propaganda. But for the sake of the people listening, can you give a few examples in Malaysia of moments where propaganda was actually permeated to the voter without them knowing, perhaps?
So I think so. Basically, propaganda is like to manipulate people, not only to manipulate but to make people hate each other. So not only to persuade you to vote for me, it's called persuasion or marketing, yeah. But if I try to also make you hate the opposite group, that it's also like a propaganda. I think one of the example is that, for instance, like there's one politician, so.
You're not going to mention names.
So you will buy my book later.
The name is here.
So toppled down, but then that time he tried to say that I was framed. I actually, even though like he stole big money. Yeah, 1 billion money. But then
you all know who we are talking about. Everybody knows. Yeah.
But then he still claimed in his social media that this is frame. And then we found that there are many supporters of him that also believe, even though, like I believe he went to court, yeah, and then court already
found him guilty.
Yeah, found him guilty.
So those are examples. That is sort of shifting the whole discussion to something else. I think you call it here because in this book you also highlight the various ways that actually people carry out propaganda. I think about 18, if I'm not mistaken, that you mentioned. So that's one of them where when one situation is happening, you sort of distract the voter by focusing on something else, something like that, right? Now, this thing, of course, this book focuses on propaganda in the digital age, which is where we are now. Now, how has social media affected a government's ability to use propaganda as a whole?
Wow, it's now massive, yeah. And when we wrote this book, we haven't even talked about the generative AI. We talk about deepfake, but not generative AI as something that massively used. So now the government, especially Indonesia, so I and Nurianti, we had like a project actually for the government, Malaysian government. But then when I compared, I think Indonesian government is more advanced, not something that I'm not proud of, yeah, but more advanced in orchestrating the narrative. More advanced means, so propaganda, basically there are two main important elements. One is a strong message, but the other element that also determine the power of propaganda is the channel on how to orchestrate the propaganda. So it's called, sometimes you call it total football, yeah. So you have to use all the channels, multi-platforms, even until communities. So now with the social media, it's really common. Even like today, we are aware there's a effort to counter people protest. So, and now it's easier because government has more resources, and then they in Indonesia context, they work very close with social media influencers. Means like someone that has 7 millions of followers. Yeah, so I think with the digital age, the propaganda message can now spread quickly and really massive and targeting various niche of audience. So not only, so if it's like a political movement, they go to Twitter, for instance. But if it's to manipulate the image during the election, they can also go to video based platform. And then it's so massive because we know in the 2019 and then 2024 election, there's a massive fabrication, but it's also, it works like, for instance, in 2019, 300 people were hired to create memes, head memes, and spread on WhatsApp. But in 2024, they did it like publicly, using platforms where they put like generative AI, and then they said like, oh, we have these apps, Gen AI, and then take pictures with us and then spread it, and then they provide all the materials. In 2019, the Indonesian government, the politician, they hire people, put it in the office, and then to create that. But in 2024, they put it in the website, claim it publicly. They call it creative politic. they call it something like that, and then they claim that 2.5 million users use that apps to create generative AI with the candidates and then spread it. Can you imagine 2.5 million data? It means, so they can use that data later to predict what people like, what's their website they serve, yeah, and then their demographic, and then they can use that later to create like generative AI. And then like even it's really hard right now to tell whether a message or a narrative is fabricated or not. So for instance, like during the presidential debate, there's a massive video on TikTok emphasizing on Prabowo's, but it's really hard to detect whether it's fabricated or not. The only thing we can tell is that because they carry the same message and then they have like a same angle of camera. Other than that, it's really hard, yeah,
to tell which is fake and which is
because you know, like in Indonesia, I think at some point also Malaysia, what makes the propaganda different with, for instance, like in the US, because in the US the labor are more expensive than in Indonesia, right? So they tend to use bots. It's actually easier to analyze and to determine because of the pattern, yeah. But then in Indonesia, because the labor are cheaper, you just need like 100 US dollar in a month, pay someone, and then they will be your social media buzzer. And then if it's people or like human troops, it's harder to identify on social media.
Now, the key thing about this whole phenomenon, as you mentioned in the book, so you talk about bots, you talk about cyber army, cyber troopers, and all these people. But in today's world, is it harder for governments to perpetuate their propaganda because you have so many channels, so many individual creators and commentators that can, it's not like last time where, for example, like in Malaysia, when before the new government, back in the days when it was Barisan Nasional, they owned all the megaphones, the news outlets, right? So they could project anything they wanted. But now with social media, you have individuals who can stand up and give alternative opinions. Does that affect a government's ability, or are they just too big that you cannot fight them?
Okay, so propaganda goals could, like at the end of the spectrum, could make you hate other people, yeah, or against other people. But on the other spectrum, it just need to make you confused, to create doubts, yeah. So if it cannot make you hate each other, at least it will make you doubt or confused. When you are confused, you don't know how to react. For instance, like during the one of the mass protests, yeah, in Indonesia about the omnibus bill, that time the government spread propaganda, then people get confused who to believe, because the government information also seems so real, and then sponsored or promoted by social media influencer. But there's also civic society organization. So that time, if we want to push people to go to the street to do mass protest, there must be first that you are sure, you have to sure that there's something wrong, and then you have to be willing to leave your home to protest, right? But if you're not sure, you don't take action.
So that is the reason why.
Yeah, that's even though it's not, it's still massive. So, but the key is to make people confused and doubt what to do. So if you're not sure, so you don't
do
protest,
anything.
you don't do anything. You just like yeah, I'm not sure, but that's also bad, because you just let something bad happen.
Exactly.
That's
Now,
all.
are you familiar with the whole reformasi movement that happened here in Malaysia? Yeah.
No, in Malaysia, no, not really.
Okay, but in your analysis of Malaysia, when you were writing this book, right, we had a long-standing Barisan National government, a coalition that was ruling for I think 60 years, if I'm not mistaken, ever since independence, and then after that it switched to the Pakatan Harapan. Now it was Pakatan Rakyat, Pakatan Harapan. In this whole time, how has the propaganda mechanism in Malaysia evolved?
Yeah. So I think that time, one is supported by younger people. One is supported by older people, and then they both went to the no. I mean, like in general, yeah. In general, they both went to different platforms. So it seems that audience that support this party only went to the Facebook, one went to the Twitter, but it's really not. If it's a cross platform, then you can see what's other different opinion, yeah. But if you don't do a cross platform, that's really hard to. So you will be stuck in your own political chamber, So I think that's what happened that time, yeah.
So basically, they were using different platforms.
And then it's not a cross platform. I think there's what should I say? It's like they just don't go to that platform because younger people know that their parents will be there, aunties will be there. At the same time, like older people, they know that. Oh, I don't want to use that because that's mainly for propaganda and my opponent. So it's so that you cannot see other different point of view.
Correct.
Yeah, and then if that's persistent, it means it's very polarized, right? It's also. Yeah, that's what happened after that.
Now, in this book, you talk a lot about misinformation. You talk a lot about fake news, and I think there is a big calling in this book for governments or for agencies in the government apparatus to sort of address this issue of a lot of fake news and all that, right? But do you think that the prevalence of fake news, misinformation, is a byproduct of the constant use of propaganda from back when? However long it may be, right? From governments of old, whether in Indonesia or Malaysia, that in your book, it seems to say that the government's use of propaganda without caring about the consequence, whether they play racial tones, they play, any religious facts. So is fake news and misinformation a result of using propaganda?
So it's actually strategy of propaganda, yeah. So fake news has been like since old times. That's why we have like yellow journalism in the old times, yeah. And then it's one of the strategy to manipulate people's perception. Disinformation's also like one of the strategy, yeah. But I think it's not the result, but in propaganda, whoever do the propaganda, they cherry pick the fact, yeah. They massage the data and evidence to whatever they think will be suitable to support their purposes, yeah. Even sometimes they limit the information without public or media even realizing it. So, for instance, like in the current events in Indonesia, we just got hacked. Our national data center got hacked. Cyber ransomware, and then government cannot do anything that time. So it's like a crisis for the government reputation. But that time they have like 4 spokesperson, 2 from 2 ministries, and then like 2 from private that provide the services, yeah. But because it keeps become like a polemic, and then the government changed the spokesperson into the coordinating ministry of politics and law.
Okay.
And he's very hard to be accessed. And after that, people just don't. The journalists don't even like ask him again. So it's not. Yeah, and then whatever he said, it's really hard to check, right? How can you check if it's only one person, one spokesperson? So I think it's also disinformation because we cannot really tell whether it's true or not.
Yeah. Now, there are a few similarities that Indonesia and Malaysia have. Obviously, we have a long-standing history. But one of it that is relevant to our discussion today is that we've had authoritarian leaders, both of us. You had in the form of Sukarno. By the way, Sukarno is he's like one of my all-time favorite leaders. I love him. I love his vision. I think if his vision of Mafilindo came to reality today, what a powerhouse we will be. We had Tun Mahathir, another authoritarian leader, right? Now, in this book, you call for, like I said, you call for the addressing of fake news and misinformation by the government. But do you think that is the right decision? Because generally, governments, when asked to prove whether this information is fake or not, they would do it based on their convenience or what they want, right? And eventually the people will still be misinformed. So do you think governments and agencies are the right people to decide whether something is fake or not?
So if it's whether it's something fake or not, so I still believe that at some point, I know we have like a different quality of like journalism or difference, but I still believe on journalism and fact-checking mechanism, yeah, compared to the government. Even I know that both in Malaysia and Indonesia, the government has like a media literacy.
Yes.
Or like a misinformation literacy, media literacy. But at some point, I believe if it's run by the government or government program sponsored media literacy, I believe at some point there still be an effort to also establish their power. So for instance, it is effective if it's just to teach people how to check fact, like or digital literacy. Digital literacy, like how to use your phone, how to use the feature of your phone. But if it's related to the quality of information, I don't believe the government program will cover that. Because, for instance, in Indonesia, the government-sponsored digital literacy, it's just end up by as a forum to internalize government law or socialize government law.
Exactly.
For instance, like internet law. So the material only end up like, oh, don't spread fake news or otherwise you'll go to jail. But they don't. What about freedom of expression, right? Freedom of speech. So I think at some level it can work just to make people that there are features on your phone or on the internet that you can use to check information. But if it's related to the quality of information, I don't believe.
Yeah, I completely
don't
agree
believe
with you.
our government.
Yes, definitely. In this book, at the end, I mean, towards the end of the book, there is a lot of, especially in the chapters where you talk about Malaysia specifically, you do go into depth about, not in depth, but you go take a deeper look and you focus on parties, political parties like PAS. You talk a lot about PAS, and you talk a lot about DAP and UMNO and all that. And it's mentioned here that it sort of credits PAS and UMNO with the rise of political Islam in Malaysia. Now, as a Muslim yourself, what do you think are the dangers or even the benefits, if you will, of the current form of political Islam practice here in Malaysia?
Yeah, so I think we cannot deny first that Islam is the majority of religion in both Malaysia and Indonesia.
Exactly.
Yeah? But as a Muslim myself, I see that at some point democracy in both countries have failed us. So if we don't trust to that, what to trust other than your religion, yeah? But I believe that Muslim in Malaysia have privilege compared to other religion, yeah. And that if you have privilege, you will, you don't think that other people deserve that, or you will think it's just nature by that, yeah. So I think it's dangerous because you will use your religion as a measurement to make policy, to make program, or to make a decision. Yeah, so that's what I think, and it's really religion is actually it's really easy to be played by whoever wants to play with the religious narrative. It's easier compared to other identity because you just say that, hey, you're wrong, kafir, yeah, or ini kafir, because it's a dogma, right? Religious is a dogma. It's real. It's really. I found it really rare. People ask about the religion, yeah, because it is what it is, yeah. But if it's about politics, for instance, or about the economy, for instance, it's really hard if you want to blame something because you have to understand how the economic works, how the politics works, yeah. Not only global economic, even like a local or national economy, it's really hard. But if it's religion, it's like, hey, you don't agree with me, then you kafir, yeah. I think it's the easiest one, and then because Malaysia majority of Muslim, so if you have that privilege, it's sometimes hard to emphasize, yeah, with other.
But interesting enough, you say that Malaysia is majority with Islam because Indonesia is the largest Islamic state in the world.
Yeah.
So when you look at both sides, when you look at politics in Indonesia and Malaysia, do you all play do you all use Islam as a tool as well, or do you think that's more exclusive to Malaysia?
So in 2000, if it's Malaysia, I believe it is still play a big role now. But in Indonesia, there's a change actually in this election. So in 2014, 2014 election, 2017 Jakarta gubernatorial election, when Catholics versus Muslim, it's like one of the polarized event, religious event, yeah. And then in 2019 too. But in this election, surprisingly, so we in my research hub at Monash, Indonesia, we monitor two things in the election: hate speech and polarization. And then I can tell about the hate speech shifting later, but the polarization, so we use big data. 30,000 social media data using 18 human annotator across social identity, because we want to make a model. So we have dashboard right now at the IG website, ig.or.id. So that dashboard, we analyze 1.5 million conversation, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But before we analyze that, we have to make the model, yeah? It's not me, it's my colleague from data scientist.
Not you. Okay.
Not me, I'm the political scientist here.
Okay.
So, but before that, before we create that model, we use human annotator. 30 million data, 18 human annotator must come into agreement that this message contain toxic, and this message is polarized. So we monitor two, yeah. And then the agreement based on the theory must be at least 70%. So if we see one text, all the 18 human annotator across religion, across identity must agree that message contain toxic, or that message is polarized. Polarized mean like really different, yeah, not like in the middle.
Like positive, negative, yeah.
Yeah, so with the hate speech, we have a good model already. That's why we publish it. But with the polarization, even until now, we're still trying to collect data because we haven't seen the polarized message, and then we only have like one. So we expect that time. We expect that time there will be like 2 rounds, but actually only one round, yeah. But with the polarization, we thought at first like, oh, we're not as polarized as in 2019. But when we look at our data again, comparing to other policy think tank that collected the data in 2019, we were actually more polarized. But so there are 4 dimensions. In 2019, the polarization is related to religion polarization. So it's heightened, more severe. But in 2024, the polarization is actually political polarization. So there are 4 polarization.
So party?
No. It's
ideology.
Pro-government or contra-government. And the pro-government, it's whether they are supporting the Jokowi political dynasty or against Jokowi efforts to build political dynasty. Yeah. The second dimension is ethnic polarization. And then the third one is economic polarization, whether you are pro foreign investment or you are against foreign investment, including Chinese foreign investment. Yeah. And then the last one is religious polarization. In 2014, 2017, 2019, it was religious polarization. So it was more severe and is easier to observe. But in 2024, when we look at the data, it's actually political polarization. But because the political polarization, Jokowi tried to manipulate the law, it's harder for people to understand. So if you want to understand how he gaming the law, you need to read, right? And our Indonesian voters, as I tell you, like low educated and then from low social class. So religious is actually not playing a big part in this election. but it's nepotism.
But so then, what is the reason for that change? From from religious to become more politically conscious.
Yeah. So there are two things. So first thing is because the politician that played with the religious identity in 2017, he ran with the representative of Muslim liberal. So he was like supported by the conservative Muslim, and then in the election he actually ran together. So it's like it doesn't work to play with religion because they work together. And then the second one is because the nepotism. So one of the candidate is actually Jokowi's first son running for the vice president, and then like it's nepotism that people don't like. It's not the they don't care if you're like not if you're Christian, Catholic anymore that time, but because they don't like the nepotism or like Jokowi's effort to continue his legacy through his son. Yeah.
Interesting. It's very interesting because I hope to
Oh
see.
my God, I'm so thirsty.
No, please drink
You
your water.
ask really hard questions.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, take your time. No, seriously, I hope to see Malaysia there one day, where our voters vote based. It sounds like Indonesian voters put a priority on politics, and things have to be done the right way, regardless of religion. I hope we come to that point one day where we surpass race and religion and focus on what's right and what's not. Now,
But be careful what you wish for.
yes, I know. That's always the case. Now, interestingly enough, you in your answer to my previous question, you actually used the word kafir. So the word kafir now has become quite popular in Malaysia. Again, because there was in a recent by-elections that happened, there was a member of the Islamic Party of Malaysia, or PAS, who termed the so-called another party called the Democratic Action Party, which has a perception of being a Chinese party, right? Because predominantly Chinese. He termed them as kafir harbi, right? Which is a very militant and a very dangerous statement to make. Obviously, he has apologized and the statement has been retracted and everything is good. But when I see this type of statements in Malaysia, you are seeing an increase in the number of times where politicians in parliament say such things. They come up with statements that are very offensive, either religiously offensive, racially ignorant, even gender ignorant as well. It's not that. Do you think that social media today, because of its nature of being very accepting of statements or opinions that are very extreme, so that they get that viral factor, which you also talk about in this book, how one way of promoting propaganda is through the viral thing. Do you think that's why in Malaysia, politics, or maybe even in general in the world, maybe has gone down a bit, because now politicians are looking to say the most ridiculous statements to get the whole mileage on social media?
So I think now it's more. So now we have like a diversified polarization, yeah. So it means that there could be many topics that you have to go extreme, but that's also how the social media platforms play. So the currency of social media is engagement.
Yes.
Yeah, and then platform can punish a content creator if you don't keep your engagement. Yeah. So if you don't post regularly, and then TikTok, for instance, will not showing your video on FYP page, for instance, or if you don't get certain number of engagement. But then to get more engagement, you cannot just say something that's in very neutral tone. You have to go either like very negative or like very stupid praising for something. Yeah. You know, so if it's like that it will create people attention. If people pay attention to it, then it will boost your engagement.
Correct.
So I think that's also part of it, because now politicians, they know that if they become extremely curse or extremely praise, that they will have there's still always fans, like supporters for that. But if you just go neutral, then it will not create anything. Correct. Because social media is about fighting for people attention, and then that's how the platforms, the nature of the platforms is for that. So I think I blame also like social media for making us to be like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. In this book, there is one line which I would like you to elaborate on. You say that the Malaysian democracy is in the decline. Mm-hmm. It's in this book. Mm-hmm. Why do you think our democracy is in the decline?
Yeah, so I think we need to ask that to Bobby, Nurianti.
If you're listening,
all the judgment
understand
from the Malaysia.
Understand from the side. Now, then let's move on to this. Of course, we have seen continuous usage of propaganda in both Indonesia and Malaysia, and of course across the world. Politics and propaganda go hand in hand. But what do you think is the impact of continuous propaganda on the critical thinking and the engagement of the general population in the country, in any country that use it?
So I think for the critical thinking, so propaganda at some point, of course, will serve people that lazy to look for information or don't have access. There are two types: either they're lazy or they don't have access. If they're lazy, of course, because there's also, like I mentioned, there's also like chambers in different situation, in different issues. For instance, like if you talk about economy, you go to this group, and then if you talk about politics, you go to this group, and then you just don't get various perspective. But there's also people who don't get access. It means that I know Malaysia internet user and access are better with compared to Indonesia, but we still have people that don't have access, or they have access but they just don't know how to do it. So I think in the long term it will make us more polarized, and then once we are very polarized, it's just about a matter of time to trigger that sentiment toward other groups. And then I believe in Malaysia and also in Indonesia, politicians like to keep that sentiment polarized, because if we keep polarized, if we keep hate each other, it will be easier for them to use later.
Definitely, yeah.
They want to harvest it.
Correct, yeah. Divide and rule.
Internalize the hate. Like I found in Indonesia, so one time, so the one of the largest narrative before 2024 election, we've been studying 3 big political events, and one of the persistent narrative is Islam versus Pancasila. Pancasila is Indonesia state ideology. So there's Indonesia state ideology.
What is that, Pancasila?
Pancasila, it's like 5 principle. Panca means
yes, yes, I read it. Persatuan Indonesia and all that.
Yeah. So there's 3 years of efforts. We see intensively in Facebook to polarize is whether you are religious especially Islam, yeah. So if you're not Islam, then it means that you have to support Pancasila, the state ideology. But why not like support the state ideology? Why not Islam support state ideology? Because like religion is also part of the state
Number one,
ideology.
yeah.
And then during that 3 years, the narrative Islam versus Pancasila were keep internalized. So we thought that we predict that in 2024 they'll just harvest that hate, yeah. But we were wrong because the two different politicians they run together.
Okay.
That's why it's another story. But it's really easy, and then politician, I believe in every country they like to keep that for their
divide and conquer. That's the rule.
Yes.
Now, in just a few last ones. In this book, there is one section where you talk about the fire hose of falsehood, which I think was employed by Indonesia. President Joko Widodo is his name. I always called him as Jokowi. Now I know it's Joko Widodo. Now, and one of the reasons why you guys say that it worked was because of low education levels, intergroup bias, self-serving bias, and confirmation bias. These are the 4 reasons why you say it worked. Do you think that poverty profits propaganda? Poverty in the form of whether money or knowledge or exposure, that when there is poverty in a country, that's when propaganda can flourish?
Yeah, I believe that. But propaganda also works in other country with a better education level. But I think if it's with poverty, it's harder for other agencies, institution in the country to check that. So if they check it, the public will not. They won't easily believe that. If it's like it's checked by the mass media, it's checked by the civil society organization, it's just they need more effort to convince the public. But for the developed country, richer country, propaganda can also play a work. But I mean, like they have a better. If other institutions check it, so they get that information, but it's just harder in a country with poverty. Yeah.
Now, just one thing. I've always asked this question, and I'll give an example. So recently, of course, in the U.S. elections, right, you saw the attempted assassination of Trump, right?
Yeah.
And all that. And I remember at home, my mother, who was against Trump, Trump is bad and Trump is this and all that, right? And then right after he got shot in his ear, and then, there was that very iconic photograph where Trump stands up and puts his hand up and all this. So this is very political gesturing. This is very common. You would have seen it in history. After seeing that photo, my mother, who is against Trump, suddenly, wow, what an amazing leader. She's so supportive of Trump and all that now, right? My question is, why is it after so long, from centuries of propaganda, why do you think voters still today can be manipulated by propaganda? Why can't we at this level go, come on, this is something I've seen before, I get a sense may not be true, or this is either populism, or this is them showing that they're great, playing sentiments. This has happened from last time around the world. Why can't we grow as a voter base and say like, hey, this is just propaganda and I'm not buying it? Why can't we be like that?
Yeah, because basically rational voters, mostly they don't exist. Yeah, no, it's also related to how our brains work.
Yeah.
So if it's like critical thinking, you have to take a long path. You have to look for their program, analyze it, learn about it. It's a long path. But if it's a dramatic event that can trigger your emotion, it's easier. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's just hard. Even like I have seen many efforts in many election that some politician they try to balance between the emotion and also the rational, like they have this program, but at the end of the day, it's the part of your brain that just get the emotion that will work.
So we are very emotionally charged.
Yeah, it's hard to learn, and then not everyone wants to learn about it.
So I love your line, rational voters don't exist. That's going to be the title of this interview. Now, Doctor, before we go, I just like to, I've read this book, guys, again, it's called Misguided Democracy in Malaysia and Indonesia. It's a fantastic book. You can get it at Gerak Budaya. If you guys are a fan of politics, I think this is definitely a book you should read. A lot of the examples from all over the world, besides Malaysia and Indonesia as well, really interesting. And sometimes when I was reading this, I was smiling to myself because, yes, this has happened in Malaysia many times. A lot of examples. Yeah. So just as a closing, what can readers get when they buy this book?
So when you get that book, you will know. It will be easier for you to identify propaganda. So once you know, it will be harder for the propaganda to affect you. Yeah.
So thank you again, Dr. Ika. I think we've come to the end, and it's been such a privilege to have you. I know it's very late, and your mind is now going back to Indonesia, so I wish you all the best in that. So guys, as always, today's been a different conversation. Usually we discuss politics in terms of issues, but today's a macro level look at an element of politics, which is propaganda, is something that I love, being a political fan myself. And if you guys want to follow Dr. Ika, we'll be sharing all her links together with the link to purchase this book on our description side. So thank you again for watching, and we have many amazing interviews coming up. The next one will be on the relationship between Sarawak, Sabah and Malaysia, as well as a deep dive into Indian politics coming up soon. So till next time, have a great week, and we'll see you. Bye.